Ever feel like you're running on a treadmill, going nowhere fast, working harder longer just to stay in the same place? Glenn, a 31-year-old HVAC technician, knew that feeling intimately. For 8 years, he'd hauled furnaces, wrestled with AC units, and braved sweltering attics and frozen basements. He was good at it, damn good, a skill he learned from his father who taught him the value of hard work and providing for his family. But lately, the weight felt different, heavier. It wasn't just the physical strain. It was the invisible burden of debt, worry, and a gnawing sense of helplessness that threatened to crush him. Glenn lived in a small 900-square-foot house, identical to all the others on his street. Inside, his home was neat, tidy, a reflection of Sarah's love and care, but outside, the peeling paint and leaning fence told a different story, a story of a family stretched thin. He was married to Sarah for 9 years, a dental hygienist working part-time to help make ends meet. They had 2 kids, Leo, 8, and Maya, 6. Glenn loved them fiercely, but Maya's chronic illness had cast a long shadow over their lives, a shadow that deepened with every mounting medical bill. $45,000 in medical debt alone loomed large, a constant reminder of his inadequacy. Add to that the truck loan and credit cards, and Glenn was staring down a $72,000 hole. Every morning, Glenn woke before dawn, the alarm blaring at 4:45 a.m. He'd hit snooze, dragging himself out of bed at 5:00, already dreading the day. In his work van, fueled by black coffee, he'd mentally map out his route, anticipating the difficult customers, the broken equipment, and the endless pressure to fix it all, fix it fast. He was earning $29 an hour, not bad, but it never seemed to be enough. He recalled his younger days, blowing money, and secretly regretted not finishing community college, feeling like it trapped him. Evenings were a blur of silent dinners, homework help with a mind elsewhere, and numbing TV before another sleepless night staring at the ceiling, the weight of his financial woes pressing down. His breaking point came on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. Glenn was sitting in his work van after a tense call with the insurance company, another denial, another battle. Through his windshield, he saw his neighbor playing catch with his son, effortless joy radiating from their faces. A wave of bitter resentment washed over him, followed by a crushing despair. In that moment, Glenn realized his anger, his constant frustration, wasn't helping. It wasn't a shield protecting his family, it was a poison corroding his soul, pushing away the very people he was fighting to protect. It had been 2 years of this helplessness since Maya's diagnosis, and he had tried everything. Working overtime, budgeting apps, toughing it out. All failures. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel, not in anger but in recognition. It was time for a change. He remembered the book on Stoicism he had bought months ago. Glenn had always been a man of action, not words, so it sat gathering dust in his van. But desperate for something, anything, he picked it up and started reading. The concept of the dichotomy of control hit him with the force of a revelation. He couldn't cure his daughter, but he could control his reaction. He could choose to be a present, loving father and husband, a source of strength in the storm rather than a casualty of it. The 2-acre test. He would take control of his inner self, his family, his workshop. This was his fight. Glenn, 31, was an HVAC technician, 8 years in the trade. His days were a blur of cramped attics, sweltering rooftops, and the endless hum of machinery. He rose before dawn, 4:45 a.m. to be exact, the alarm a jarring assault on his sleep. Most mornings, he hit snooze, succumbing to the pull of the mattress before dragging himself out at 5:00. The routine was etched in his bones. A quick shower, a gulp of black coffee, and then into the work van by 5:30 a.m., mentally steeling himself for another day of relentless demands. His life was a paradox of competence and quiet desperation. He could diagnose a faulty compressor in minutes, calm down an irate homeowner with a gentle explanation, and haul a furnace twice his size up a flight of stairs without complaint. But beneath the surface, Glenn was drowning. $45,000 in medical bills loomed over him like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of his powerlessness. Add to that $18,000 for the truck he needed for work and $9,000 in credit card debt. Every extra hour he worked, every clever repair he made felt like a drop in the ocean. He lived with his wife, Sarah, and their 2 children, Leo and Maya, in a small 900-square-foot house in a working-class suburb. The house was neat inside, but outside it needed a new coat of paint and the back fence was leaning, a reflection of Glenn's own weary state. Their evenings were often quiet, strained. Dinner was eaten mostly in silence, Glenn's mind elsewhere, calculating the next payment, the next doctor's appointment. He loved his kids fiercely, but often he was too consumed by worry to truly be present, snapping at them over small things, his patience worn thin. "Daddy, can we play catch?" Leo would ask, his eyes full of hope. Glenn would sigh, rubbing his tired eyes. "Not tonight, buddy. Daddy's got a headache." It wasn't a lie exactly. The tension headache had become a near-constant companion, a physical manifestation of the anxiety that gnawed at him. He'd help with homework later, but his mind would be miles away, replaying conversations with insurance agents, calculating interest rates, feeling the weight of his responsibilities pressing down. His father had taught him the value of hard work, of providing for his family, no matter the cost. Glenn had taken that lesson to heart, but somewhere along the way, the cost had become too high. He was working harder than ever, yet he felt like he was losing ground. The stoic facade he presented to the world, the image of a dependable, capable technician, hid a deep-seated fear that he was failing as a husband and father. Sarah, his wife of 9 years, saw the strain etched on his face, the way his shoulders slumped a little more each day. "You need to slow down, Glenn," she'd say, her voice laced with concern. "You're burning yourself out." He'd shrug it off, offering a tired smile. "Just gotta keep pushing, Sarah, for the kids." But inside, he knew she was right. He was running on fumes, fueled by worry and a growing sense of hopelessness. He was trapped, he felt, and he was only 31 years old. The alarm shrieked at 4:45 a.m. as it did every morning. Glenn slapped the snooze button, a small act of rebellion against the relentless pressure. 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes to escape the reality of $72,000 in debt, a sick daughter, and another day hauling heavy equipment in the sweltering summer heat or freezing winter cold. By 5:00 a.m., he dragged himself out of bed. The house was quiet, only the faint hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. He moved like a ghost, careful not to wake Sarah or the kids. Downstairs, he brewed a pot of black coffee, the strong, bitter aroma filling the small kitchen. He didn't bother with breakfast, too anxious to eat. He poured the coffee into a large thermos and headed out to his work van, a Ford Transit Connect plastered with the logo of Reliable HVAC. 5:30 a.m. The engine coughed to life, and he pulled out of the driveway of his 900-square-foot house. Identical houses lined the street, each one a testament to the working-class suburb he called home. The drive to the shop was a blur of stoplights and traffic. Glenn stared straight ahead, his mind racing. He mentally reviewed his schedule for the day. A broken furnace at Mrs. Henderson's, a faulty air conditioner at a doctor's office, and a preventative maintenance call at a local grocery store. He ran through the possible problems, the tools he'd need, the parts he might have to order. Every job was a puzzle, a problem to be solved. That was the part of the job he still enjoyed, the challenge of diagnosing and fixing mechanical systems. It was a skill he'd honed over 8 years, from a nervous apprentice to a seasoned field technician. He remembered his father, a factory worker with calloused hands and a no-nonsense attitude. His dad had gotten him the apprenticeship, a turning point in Glenn's life. For the first time, he felt like he was good at something, like he had a purpose. Now, years later, those same hands were burdened by worry, the purpose clouded by debt. He was earning $29 an hour, $4,640 a month before taxes, but it never felt like enough. The shop was a hive of activity at 6:00 a.m. Other technicians milled around, grabbing tools and loading vans. Glenn nodded a greeting to a few of them, but mostly kept to himself. He clocked in, grabbed his work orders, and headed back to his van. The first call was Mrs. Henderson. As he drove, he took a swig of coffee, the caffeine giving him a momentary jolt. He pictured Maya, his 6-year-old daughter, her face pale and drawn. Her chronic illness had turned their lives upside down. He arrived at Mrs. Henderson's, an elderly woman with a kind smile. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Glenn," she said, her voice weak. "It's freezing in here." He smiled back, trying to project an air of competence. "I'll get it fixed for you, Mrs. Henderson." He spent the next hour troubleshooting the furnace, his hands moving with practiced ease. He found a faulty igniter, replaced it, and soon the furnace was roaring back to life. Mrs. Henderson was overjoyed, offering him cookies and a warm smile. It was a small victory, a moment of satisfaction in a day filled with stress. But as he drove to his next call, the feeling faded. The medical bills loomed large in his mind, a constant reminder of his financial struggles. He thought about Sarah, working part-time as a dental hygienist, trying to help make ends meet. He felt a pang of guilt. He wasn't the husband he wanted to be, the father his kids deserved. He was too consumed by worry to truly be present. His secret dream of owning a small workshop, of fixing things on his own terms, felt like a distant fantasy. The day wore on, a relentless cycle of driving, diagnosing, and repairing. By 5:00 p.m., he was exhausted, his body aching, his mind numb. He drove home in silence, the setting sun casting long shadows across the road. He dreaded facing his family, knowing that he wouldn't have the energy to be the husband and father they needed. He pulled into his driveway, the leaning back fence a stark reminder of all the things he couldn't afford to fix. He was a failure, he thought, a hardworking, well-intentioned failure. Glenn sat in his work van, the engine idling, the radio silent. He stared at the house next door. A father and son, maybe 8 years old, were tossing a baseball back and forth. Easy, effortless. Sunlight glinted off the boy's blonde hair as he laughed. Glenn felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a bitter resentment rising in his chest. He'd just gotten off the phone with the insurance company, another dead end. Maya's medical bills were piling up faster than he could pay them, $45,000. It felt like an ocean of debt pulling him under. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel. The horn blared, a jarring sound that echoed in the quiet street. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. It didn't help. He saw Maya's face, small and pale, her smile dimmed by fatigue. He pictured Sarah, her shoulders slumped, her eyes filled with worry. He was failing them. He was supposed to protect them, provide for them. But all he was doing was working himself to the bone, only to fall further behind. He watched the father and son again. The boy made a diving catch, landing in the grass with a triumphant yell. The father ruffled his hair, beaming with pride. Glenn felt a wave of despair wash over him. He hadn't played catch with Leo in weeks. He was too tired, too stressed. He was missing out on their lives. "Damn it!" he muttered, his voice thick with anger. He punched the dashboard again, harder this time. His hand throbbed, but he barely noticed. He felt like he was drowning, gasping for air, but finding only more water. His anger wasn't a weapon against his problems. It was a poison, killing him from the inside. He grabbed the self-help book he'd been hiding in the glove compartment, the one he was too ashamed to bring into the house. Stoicism. What a joke. What could some ancient philosophy possibly do for a 31-year-old HVAC tech drowning in medical debt? But he flipped it open anyway, the pages falling open to a chapter he'd marked months ago. The dichotomy of control. He scanned the words, his eyes blurring with tears. Some things are up to us and some things are not up to us. He could not magically make Maya healthy. He could not erase the debt. He could not control the insurance company, but he could control his response. He could choose how he reacted. He could be a calm, present father and husband in the middle of the storm. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. He had been so focused on the things he couldn't control that he had neglected the things he could. He could choose to be present, to be loving, to be supportive. He could choose to focus on the small moments of joy, to find gratitude in the midst of the chaos. He could choose to be the man his family needed him to be, not the man his problems were turning him into. He took another deep breath, this time with a sense of purpose. The anger began to subside, replaced by a quiet resolve. He couldn't fix everything, not today, maybe not ever. But he could start by being a better father, a better husband. He could start by being present. He started the van. It was time to go home. He grabbed the self-help book he'd been hiding in the glove compartment, the one he was too ashamed to bring into the house. Stoicism. What a joke. What could some ancient philosophy possibly do for a 31-year-old HVAC tech drowning in medical debt? But he flipped it open anyway, the pages falling open to a chapter he'd marked months ago. The dichotomy of control. He scanned the words, his eyes blurring with tears. Some things are up to us and some things are not up to us. He could not magically make Maya healthy. He could not erase the debt. He could not control the insurance company, but he could control his response. He could choose how he reacted. Could be a calm, present father and husband in the middle of the storm. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. He had been so focused on the things he couldn't control that he had neglected the things he could. He could choose to be present, to be loving, to be supportive. He could choose to focus on the small moments of joy, to find gratitude in the midst of the chaos. He could choose to be the man his family needed him to be, not the man his problems were turning him. He took another deep breath, this time with a sense of purpose. The anger began to subside, replaced by a quiet resolve. He couldn't fix everything, not today, maybe not ever. But he could start by being a better father, a better husband. He could start by being present. He started the van. It was time to go home. The engine rumbled to life, the familiar sound grounding him. Glenn sat for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, the grease ingrained in his skin, a testament to years of hard work. He thought of his own father, a factory worker with calloused hands, the man who taught him how to provide. He hadn't failed, he was just lost, and now he needed to find his way back. As he drove, he replayed the conversation with Sarah from the night before, the one that ended with her turning away in tears. "You're not even here, Glenn," she'd said, her voice thick with exhaustion. "Just gone." Those words echoed in his mind, a painful reminder of his absence. He pictured Leo's hopeful face when he asked him to play catch, only to be met with, "Not tonight, buddy, Dad's tired." And Maya always smiling despite everything, her small hand reaching for his, only to be met with his preoccupied stare. "I am done living like this," he muttered, his voice cracking with emotion. He made a decision then, right there in the van, on that familiar stretch of road. It wouldn't be easy, nothing ever was, but he would fight for his family, not with anger and resentment, but with presence and love. He would be the rock they needed, the calm in the storm. He would find a way to navigate this debt, this illness, this life, without losing himself in the process. The 2 acres behind his house felt like a possibility. He remembered the fishing trips with his dad on summer mornings. If there was to be a plan, that's where it would start. The gravel crunched under the tires as Glenn pulled into his driveway. The small house, a symbol of both accomplishment and burden, stood before him. $90,000 seemed like an insurmountable mountain. He looked at his work boots, scuffed and worn, a silent testament to his daily grind. $29 an hour wasn't cutting it. He thought of Sarah's weary smile and Maya's fragile health. He had to find a way. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Glenn quietly slipped out to the garage. The vintage turntable sat under a thick layer of dust. He hadn't touched it in months. He carefully cleaned it off, the smooth wood feeling comforting beneath his calloused fingers. As the needle dropped on an old Howlin' Wolf record, a familiar blues riff filled the garage. He closed his eyes. Music, one of the only things that could momentarily quiet the storm inside his head. Remembered a book tucked away in his work van, one he'd bought on a whim a few months back. He felt a little embarrassed pulling it out, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It seemed silly, a roughneck like him reading philosophy. But he opened it anyway, the pages falling open to a marked passage. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Glenn read the words again, slowly letting them sink in. It felt like a punch to the gut. Could it be this simple? He thought, Maya's disease, the debt, the worry, all swirling around him like a vortex. He couldn't control any of that, but he could control how he reacted. He could choose to be present, to be strong, to be a father and a husband, not just a bill-paying machine. The next line hit him even harder. "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He thought about his dad again, the pride in his eyes as Glenn mastered a difficult repair. He remembered fixing that complex refrigeration unit no one else could figure out. He was good with his hands. He was good at solving problems. And for the first time in a long time, a spark of hope flickered within him. He thought of the 2 acres of overgrown land behind his house. He could grow food. He could start a small repair business on the side. Something. Glenn walked back inside, the blues music fading behind him. He found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through medical bills. Her shoulders were slumped, her face etched with worry. He sat down next to her, took her hand, and looked her in the eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I haven't been here, but I will be, I promise." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with skepticism and a sliver of hope. "What changed, Glenn?" she asked softly. He squeezed her hand. "I realized I can't fix everything," he said, "but I can fix myself. And I can be here for you, for the kids. That's what I can do." He knew it was just the beginning. He knew the road ahead would be long and hard. But for the first time in 2 years, Glenn felt a sense of calm. He had a plan, and he was ready to fight. Glenn knew words were cheap. He'd made promises before, empty promises fueled by fleeting optimism. This time felt different. This time, something inside him had truly shifted. The old Glenn, the one drowning in helplessness, was gone. In his place stood a man ready to face the storm, not as a victim, but as a captain of his own ship. It was day 0, the beginning of his commitment. That night, after the kids were asleep, Glenn sat at the kitchen table with Sarah. The medical bills lay scattered between them, a stark reminder of their $72,000 debt. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting long shadows across their faces. "I've been thinking," Glenn began, his voice low and steady, "about the 2 acres. Sarah looked at him, her brow furrowed. "What about it?" "I want to start a garden," he said. "Grow our own vegetables, maybe even sell some at the farmer's market. It won't solve all our problems, but it's a start." He paused, gathering his courage. And I want to start fixing things on the side in the garage. Word of mouth, cash only, I can make more money than the poker game ever could. He remembered the pride he felt fixing that refrigeration unit. He knew he had the skills. He just needed to use them differently. For himself, for his family. Sarah was silent for a long moment, studying his face. She saw something different in his eyes, a resolve she hadn't seen in years. "You really mean it, don't you?" she asked. Glenn nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I do. I'm tired of just surviving. I want to live. I want us to live." He took her hand again, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I can't promise everything will be okay," he said, "but I promise I won't give up. On us, on Maya, on anything." Fear still lingered, a cold knot in his stomach. Fear of failure, fear of disappointing his family, fear of Maya's condition worsening. But beneath the fear, a stronger emotion was growing. Hope. Hope that he could provide for his family, not just financially, but emotionally. Hope that he could find a sense of peace amidst the chaos. Hope that he could be the father and husband he always wanted to be. He thought of his dad again, the factory worker with calloused hands and a quiet strength. He thought of the values he had instilled in him. Hard work, perseverance, and unwavering commitment to family. Glenn knew he had a long way to go. He knew there would be setbacks and challenges along the way, but he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had Sarah, Leo, and Maya. He had his skills, his resilience, and his newfound resolve, and he had 2 acres of land waiting to be transformed. He pulled Sarah close, a genuine smile gracing his face for the first time in what felt like forever. He whispered into her hair, "Let's do this." The first week was hell. Glenn woke up Monday morning at 4:45 a.m., the alarm blaring like a fire alarm in his ear. He didn't snooze. He knew every wasted minute was a stolen minute from his family, a minute he could be using to claw his way out of the $72,000 debt that suffocated him. He swung his legs out of bed, the familiar ache in his lower back already present. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to erase the dark circles under his deep-set blue eyes. His reflection stared back, a 31-year-old man looking older than his years. The gray hairs in his neatly trimmed brown beard seemed to multiply overnight. He knew he had to focus, had to push through. Maya needed him. Sarah needed him. Leo needed him. He was their anchor. The first call of the day was a broken furnace at a daycare center. Glenn wrestled with frozen pipes and faulty wiring for 6 hours straight, his calloused hands numb with cold. He swore under his breath as he barked his knuckles for the 10th time. By noon, his frustration was boiling over. The daycare director hovered nearby, her voice laced with barely concealed panic. "Mr. Davis, will it be fixed soon? The children are freezing." Glenn, usually stoic, snapped. "I'm doing the best I can, lady. These things take time." He instantly regretted his outburst. This wasn't him. This wasn't the man he wanted to be. He took a deep breath, reminded himself of the dichotomy of control. He couldn't control the broken furnace, but he could control his reaction. He forced a calm tone. "I apologize," he said. "I'll have it fixed as soon as possible." He refocused, channeling his anger into his work. By 3 p.m., the furnace was roaring back to life, the daycare center filled with warmth. He resisted the urge to feel proud. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. That night, after a silent dinner, Leo asked him to play catch in the backyard. Glenn wanted to say no. He was exhausted, his body screaming for rest. But he remembered his promise to Sarah. He remembered his resolution to be present. He grabbed his old baseball glove, the leather cracked and worn, and headed outside. For 20 minutes, he tossed the ball with Leo, focusing only on the sound of their laughter and the feel of the ball in his hand. It was a small moment, a tiny victory against the overwhelming weight of his problems. The next day brought a new set of challenges: a leaky air conditioner at a retirement home, a clogged drain at a fast food restaurant, a frantic call from Sarah about Maya's rising fever. Each obstacle tested his resolve, pushing him closer to the breaking point. He fought the urge to retreat into silence, to bottle up his emotions until they exploded in frustration. He kept reading his Stoicism book during his lunch break, finding solace in the words of Marcus Aurelius. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Glenn clung to that idea like a lifeline. He couldn't control Maya's illness, the mounting medical bills, or the relentless demands of his job, but he could control his response. He could choose to be a calm, present, loving father and husband, even in the midst of the storm. His hidden strength, the resilience he'd inherited from his father, started to surface. He pushed through the fatigue, the frustration, and the fear. He kept working, kept providing, kept loving. He wasn't just surviving, he was fighting. Day 12 arrived and Glenn noticed something. Maya's fever had broken. She was weak but smiled weakly up at him. Sarah looked exhausted but hopeful. He realized he hadn't seen that look in her eyes for a long time. That morning, Glenn woke up before the alarm. It wasn't the jump-out-of-bed enthusiasm of a lottery winner, more like the quiet determination of someone who knows what needs to be done. The familiar dread wasn't as heavy. He still felt it, but it didn't suffocate him. At work, diagnosing a faulty furnace felt different. Instead of rushing, fueled by anxiety, Glenn slowed down. He methodically checked each component, his years of experience guiding him. He remembered his dad, a factory worker, showing him how to take pride in his work, no matter how small the task. The frantic customer, usually a trigger for Glenn's own bottled-up frustrations, was met with a calm, reassuring voice. He explained the problem clearly, laid out the options, and got to work. He surprised himself when he added, "I know this is stressful, sir. We'll get this sorted." The customer, a man in his late 60s, visibly relaxed. "Thanks, son." "Appreciate that." It was a small interaction, but it left Glenn feeling lighter. Later that day, a call came from the office. A cancellation. He would have a couple of hours free. For once, the thought of extra rest didn't come to mind. Instead, he thought about a long-neglected task, replacing the rotted wood on the back steps of their small, 900-square-foot house. He stopped at the hardware store, picked up the lumber and some screws. It wasn't a glamorous project, but it was tangible. Something he could fix. Something he could make better. As he worked, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and gold. The rhythmic thud of the hammer, the smell of fresh-cut wood, the sweat on his brow, it was a welcome contrast to the endless calculations and worries swirling in his head. Leo came outside and watched him. "Can I help, Dad?" Leo asked tentatively. Glenn paused, remembering all the times he'd brushed Leo off, claiming he was too busy. "Sure, buddy. Grab that level for me." Together, they measured, cut, and screwed the new boards into place. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid. As they stood back to admire their work, Glenn put his arm around Leo's shoulders. "Thanks, son. You're a big help." The 8-year-old beamed with pride. "Can we do more stuff tomorrow, Dad?" Glenn simply nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Day 16 brought a new challenge. A late notice regarding Maya's therapy bill, more than $800 that he didn't have. Panic flared. The old anxiety threatened to consume him. He fought it back, remembering the words he'd read. Focus on what you can control. He couldn't conjure up money out of thin air, but he could call the insurance company, negotiate a payment plan, and explore other options. Instead of letting the bill paralyze him, he took action. He made the call, calmly explained his situation, and to his surprise, negotiated a lower monthly payment. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Sarah found Glenn in the garage, listening to an old blues record. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice softer than he'd heard in weeks. "Yeah, but I got the therapy bill sorted," he replied, not turning around. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Glenn. I know you're trying." He turned, his blue eyes meeting hers. I messed up. I let the worry eat me alive. It's not fair to you or the kids." She cupped his face in her hands. "We'll get through this together." They hugged, a long, overdue embrace that felt like a lifeline in the storm. By day 21, a subtle shift had occurred. It wasn't a sudden transformation, more like a slow, steady awakening. Glenn wasn't magically debt-free, Maya wasn't suddenly cured, and his job was still demanding. But something inside him had changed. The weight on his shoulders felt lighter, his steps more deliberate. He wasn't just an HVAC technician drowning in debt. He was Glenn, the husband, the father, the man who could fix things, not just machines, but his own life, one small step at a time. He was finding freedom, not in a sweeping escape, but in the quiet acceptance and courageous action in the face of his everyday life. The mechanic found freedom, one 2-acre patch at a time. Day 30, 1 month in, Sarah started calling him Glenn, again instead of just Dad or nothing at all. It was small, but it was everything. At dinner, Leo, his 8-year-old, asked him a real question about how air conditioners worked, not just a grunt in response to a request. Glenn explained it, using simple terms, his hands gesturing as if he were showing him a real unit. Maya, his 6-year-old, smiled. She hadn't smiled that much in months. Those were small victories, but they mattered more than any overtime check. It was about connection, about being present. At work, things were different too. He was still reliable, but he was more patient with the younger techs. He remembered being a nervous apprentice, messing up a simple wiring job. His father got him an entry-level job as an HVAC apprentice. He saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear he used to feel. Now, instead of barking orders, he showed them how to do it right, step by step. He'd found that teaching calmed him, it grounded him. One morning, his boss, Frank, called him into his office. Glenn braced himself. Frank wasn't known for handing out compliments. "Glenn, I gotta say, you've been different lately," Frank said, leaning back in his chair. "Customers have been calling, specifically asking for you. They say you actually listen, you explain things. Hell, Mrs. Henderson called you a godsend after you fixed her furnace last week." Glenn just shrugged, trying to play it cool. Inside, he felt a flicker of pride. It wasn't just about fixing the furnace. It was about fixing a problem, making someone's life a little easier. The medical debt still loomed, a dark cloud on the horizon. But it didn't feel as suffocating. He was attacking it bit by bit. He picked up extra shifts when he could, but he didn't let it consume him. He made time for the kids, 20 minutes every night, just like he promised himself. Sometimes it was reading a book, other times it was building a Lego tower, but it was always uninterrupted, always present. He began to fish again, waking up before dawn. Sitting by the lake, watching the sunrise, he found a sliver of peace, a moment to breathe, to remember why he was fighting. It reminded him of what mattered. He knew he had to do everything he could for his family, but that didn't mean he had to do it angry. One Saturday, Sarah suggested they work on the yard together. Glenn had been avoiding it, too many memories of struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments, staring at the peeling paint, the leaning fence. It all felt like another failure. But this time he grabbed a hammer and some nails and they started fixing the fence together. Leo helped, hammering clumsily but with enthusiasm. Maya painted a section of the fence with bright pink flowers. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. It was a testament to their resilience, to their ability to find joy even in the midst of hardship. The old vinyl was playing on the Bluetooth speaker. Sarah was holding his hand as he worked. He felt present. It wasn't fixed, but it felt more like home than it had in years. As the sun set, Glenn stood back, looking at his family, at the leaning fence with its mismatched colors, at the small house that was both a burden and a haven. He still didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He was no longer drowning. He was swimming. He was finally fighting for the right things, for the people he loved, for the man he wanted to be. He learned that true strength wasn't about changing the world around you, but about mastering the world within you. He learned to accept what he cannot change and have the courage to act on the things he can. Glenn started waking up before the alarm. Not much before, maybe 15 minutes, but enough to have a quiet cup of coffee before the day crashed in. He'd sit in the garage, listening to Muddy Waters on the old turntable. The crackle and hiss were a comfort, a reminder that things didn't have to be perfect to be good. The bills were still there, Maya still needed checkups, but the dread had eased. He was present. At work, things shifted too. A customer was yelling about a broken furnace, the usual winter emergency. Glenn took a breath, remembering the book. He couldn't control the customer's anger, but he could control his response. He listened, really listened, until the man ran out of steam. Then in his slow, gravelly voice, he explained the problem, the solution, the cost. No arguing, no defensiveness, just facts. The customer, surprised by the calm, agreed to the repair. As Glenn worked, he felt a strange satisfaction. It wasn't just fixing the furnace, it was fixing himself. "You okay, Glenn? You seem different," his coworker Mark asked during lunch. Glenn shrugged, took a bite of his sandwich. "Just trying to stay focused on what I can control." Mark looked at him sideways but didn't push. Glenn knew he wouldn't understand. The 31-year-old felt like an old man in a young man's world. He started using his evenings differently. Instead of numbing out in front of the TV, he initiated a 20-minute rule. With Leo and Maya, 20 minutes of uninterrupted playtime, their choice. Sometimes it was board games, sometimes building forts with blankets. One night, Maya wanted to learn how to play poker, like in the movies she'd seen. Sarah rolled her eyes, but Glenn dealt the cards. He showed her how to bluff, how to read people's faces. He saw a spark of something fierce in her eyes, a strength that reminded him of himself. For the first time in a long time, he laughed until his sides hurt. Sarah noticed the change. "You've been lighter," she said one night after the kids were asleep. They were sitting on the porch swing, the repaired fence a silent witness. "It's nice." Glenn took her hand, his calloused fingers finding hers. "Still a long way to go," he admitted, "but I'm trying." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "That's all I ask." The medical bills didn't magically disappear. The debt still loomed. But Glenn started looking for ways to use his skills to generate extra income. He remembered his dad, always tinkering in the garage, fixing lawnmowers and small engines for neighbors. He put an ad on Craigslist offering repair services. The first few weeks were slow, but then the calls started coming in. People needed their lawnmowers tuned up, their snow blowers fixed. He was good at it, damn good. The garage, once a symbol of his failure, became his sanctuary. The whir of the engine, the smell of gasoline, the satisfaction of making something broken whole again. It reminded him of his turning point when he realized that he had skills. This was his way out. One evening, after fixing a particularly stubborn lawnmower engine, Glenn found a small, worn leather pouch tucked inside. He opened it and found a handful of old coins, some foreign, some tarnished. He couldn't place them, but he imagined them being from a man with a similar life, a working man who understood the value of a hard-earned dollar. Glenn closed the pouch, feeling a strange connection to the past. He didn't need the coin.